Hello, this is Leslie Spees with Influence HR Consulting, and our presentation today is Quiet Cracking, the Silent Threat to Retention. And no, quiet cracking is not doing crack quietly at work. We'll talk about what it is. So first of all, I just want to kind of go through what all this quiet stuff is, because there's been quite a few trends over the years. So the first was quiet quitting. This actually happened through Gen Z doing a TikTok video during COVID about how he was doing the bare minimum to get by with his job and encouraging others to do the same, and it took off. The second was quiet firing. Talk about what that is. And the third is quiet cracking. And of course, that's going to be the meat of our presentation today. A little more about quiet quitting. It is where employees are intentionally disengaged and do the bare minimum to get by. It results obviously in lower productivity, turnover, weaker retention, and it erodes the workplace culture because other people get really frustrated. It's not necessarily about being lazy. It's more about employees reclaiming boundaries when they feel some kind of way. So it's when they feel overworked, underpaid, unappreciated, and disconnected from purpose or growth. Quiet firing came about a few years later, and this is where employers or managers push employees out indirectly instead of addressing performance problems head on, which is what they should do. It damages trust, culture, and retention. And it's not really a new thing. Another term for it is really constructive discharge, which has been around for years. Some examples might be rather than terminating somebody, the leader may stop giving meaningful assignments or growth opportunities, maybe withhold feedback, coaching, recognition from that person, exclude them from meetings, projects, decision making, create unreasonable workload expectations, or reduce resources. So, quiet firing, not a good thing. Leaders, do your job, address performance head on, and don't be passive aggressive and use this approach. All right, so here we are with quiet cracking. I actually just heard this term for the first time a couple of months ago. So this is where people are functionally doing their work, but internally breaking under the pressure. How prevalent is it? Pretty darn prevalent. So research says that 59% of workers are experiencing it, with higher rates among men and the younger generations. Like for you to just reflect on whether you've ever experienced it. I certainly have. It's really very similar to burnout, but it's probably like a step before you get to full burnout mode. If you have experienced it, think about the circumstances that led to it and what was the result and how did you deal with it. I know for me, I ended up leaving the organization. I was in a job where, as people left, all of their job duties were given to me. And I had a boss who was very frugal and did never want to spend money. And I wasn't very good at the time at saying no or pushing back. And by the time that I really was overwhelmed and probably in the position of quietly cracking, I did say something, and eventually I just ended up leaving. But if I had addressed it earlier, potentially, maybe there would have been a different outcome. So the top two reasons for quiet cracking are excessive workload and personal stress, followed by bad management, repetitive tasks, poor compensation, lack of appreciation, and limited growth opportunities. Why it matters, you could probably guess, but it could result in sudden turnover, declining mental health, disengagement, increased absenteeism, and decreased performance. So I've got a little quiz for you to do. like for you to think about how your organization is doing. And there are 7 questions here. So you have this on video. You can pause it, do the little quiz, and there's kind of an answer key kind of thing at the bottom to see where you fall. What leaders in HR can do about quiet cracking? We're going to go through all of these. So the first is to normalize conversations about stress. And I think that most organizations and really our society as a whole is doing a better job with that. But knowing how to recognize subtle signs of extreme stress or burnout and initiate caring check-ins. Right. So I want you to think about the subtle signs of quiet cracking, which is essentially right before burnout or maybe even the early stages of burnout. So there's a bunch of them. There's behavioral, and I'm not going to read these to you. You guys can read through them. Emotional, cognitive, physical. All right. So once you recognize that there may be signs there, initiating caring check-ins is important. And this could be done, by a manager, by an HR person, and even a coworker. So it involves the C, and I'm going to use a clear acronym for this purpose. The C is check in on the employee. So maybe just ask them, you seem a little more stressed than usual. Is there something going on? How are you doing personally? Once you've asked them that question, then listen non-judgmentally. The E is extend empathy and reassurance as you're meeting with them. The A is ask some open-ended questions to get additional information. And the R is refer to resources. So it kind of depends on how the conversation goes, but you may have, for example, an employee assistance program in your organization that provides counseling. You may know of some resources in the community. You may have some other resources within your organization. So, whatever that is appropriate for the situation at hand. Number two strategy is to manage workload realistically. And we'll go through these in more detail, but set clear priorities, align workload with capacity, build flexibility into schedules, monitor those early warning signs, and be a role model. Managing workload. So the first is setting clear priorities. So focusing on the must do's versus the nice to do. So if you are in a leadership position, helping employees to do that, helping them rank projects and making that visible. And encouraging them, or if it's for yourself, saying no or not yet to initiatives that may overwhelm the team without a clear return on investment. Aligning workload with capacity. So, looking at capacity regularly, making sure that it's balanced across the team. So, this is more for a manager. HR could help encourage this. Build breathing room into schedules. Sure, all of you know that when you're running from one meeting to another throughout the day or, having calls back to back without any breathing room, it's pretty overwhelming. So, wherever you can, building in some breathing room. Break down large projects, so chunking tasks, setting milestones, and celebrating progress along the way, and encouraging some realistic timelines. Building flexibility into schedules, so offering autonomy to employees, leaving some buffer time for interruptions or rework. So if you have a project that needs to get done before the end of next month, perhaps, making the deadline the third week of the month so that you have that last week to kind of work through anything that you need to. Use flexibility strategically to manage overload. Monitor early warning signs, so track overtime or weekend work. Watch for declining quality, missed deadlines, or workload concerns, as those can be red flags. Ask about workload as you meet with employees in one-on-ones and how they're feeling about that. Be a role model. So don't send those emails at 3 in the morning. You can schedule them out. So if you're working at 3 in the morning, people don't necessarily know that you did that. Don't praise overwork as dedication because that is not being a good role model for work-life integration and for staving off the quiet cracking. Take some vacation yourself and encourage others to do so. Don't make them feel guilty for doing that. And don't make them feel like they need to work on their vacation. Number three, strengthen management practices. A recent study said that managers have as much impact on an employee's mental health as a spouse or partner. So you want to definitely upskill your managers on communication, empathy, and coaching. All of those are going to be important to preventing quiet cracking. And ensure that they are giving regular feedback and recognition so that employees feel that they are seen and heard. Number four, create growth and leverage strengths. When employees feel that they have limited growth and don't get to work in their areas of strength, they're much more likely to get burned out. So some growth opportunities that you could look at, and they don't have to be expensive. The best way, 70% of learning happens through stretch projects, and that involves assigning a project that's just a little bit out of the employee's skill set, where they really have to stretch a bit to get it done and learn some new things. Career paths are a great strategy. I'm not sure why more organizations don't use that. It does take some time to develop them, but when employees have visibility into how they can grow within the organization, it's a great retention tool. Special projects could be a growth opportunity, lateral moves, and maybe rotating those monotonous tasks. You'll remember that that was one of the things that contribute to the quiet cracking. So rotating those amongst the team could be a good strategy. Leveraging strengths. So when employees work in their areas of strength or genius, they're much more likely to be engaged and less likely to burn out. So, some of the ways that you assess their strengths, I use a tool called the Working Genius, which I absolutely love. It's simple, it takes 10 minutes. It goes through 6 types of work. It gives you 2 that are your geniuses, where when you work in those areas, they bring you joy, you're kind of in the flow. 2 are in the middle, 2 are your frustrations, where when you work in those areas, you're really likely to get drained and even potentially burned out over time. So I think it's a great tool. Some other things that you could look at are Clifton Strengths. You could simply have conversations with the employee to ask them questions like, what are the things you most enjoy about your job? What drains you? What do you feel like your strengths, etc. All right, number 5, support well-being. We spend a lot of our time at work, so it's important to support the overall well-being of employees at work. Ways to do this: encourage positive relationships within the team. So I'm not saying set anybody up on a date. I'm just saying, allow opportunities for employees to develop some friendships, positive acquaintances, things like that, because it really is important to well-being. In fact, on their engagement survey, Gallup asked the question, do you have a best friend at work? I never loved that question, just because I think best friend is a bit extreme, but they include it in their short list of questions, which indicates that it's pretty darn important to have friendships at work. Support. So you want to, as a leader or HR, support company initiatives, benefits, and programs around employee well-being. That does not involve talking about them once at open enrollment. You want to do that on a regular basis because people have to hear things about 7 times before they stick. And really, most times you're not paying attention to things unless it's something you need to use at the moment. So, if you have an employee assistance program, communicating that on a regular basis. If the company is doing well-being challenges or initiatives, communicating that regularly, whatever it is, just continually keeping that in front of employees. Be flexible. So I realize that not all companies can have flexible schedules and remote and hybrid work, etc. But just being flexible and assisting employees in blending their work and life where possible, realizing that we're human and we do have commitments and things that we need to do outside of work is really important to promoting well-being. All right, number 6, build a culture of appreciation. A culture of appreciation is going to help to buffer against stress and burnout by reinforcing that your effort matters and it's part of something bigger than just your piece of the pie. Some forms of recognition, verbal, that's the verbal praise, maybe a call out in meetings, a shout out on email. That's actually written. Written recognition would be like thank you notes, maybe sticky notes, email, those kind of things. Tangible rewards. So that would be maybe a gift card that's tied in with their preferences. Maybe you know that they like dogs and you bring in a little sticky pad with dogs on it, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be anything big. Peer recognition, so really encouraging peers to recognize one another, providing opportunities for growth and opportunities maybe to attend events and different things can be a form of recognition. And then there's organization-wide recognition. So that might be a program around core values. It could be service awards, those kind of things. PATS for appreciation. So I like to use the PATS model to guide appreciation. The P is for preferences. So really to make it effective, you need to tap into the employee's preferences and learn a little bit about them and how they like to be recognized. So some people may want to be recognized in the company town hall because they love public recognition. Others would be like totally embarrassed by that. So just knowing a little bit about your employees. Making it authentic. Don't make it seem like you're just checking off a box or doing it because it's something that you know you should be doing. Make it feel authentic. Make it timely, so as close to whatever the event that you're recognizing is as possible. And make it specific. So don't say just a good job or that was a good presentation. Share some specifics around why you thought it was good, because then that's going to provide them with data on what they need to repeat in the future. All right, I've got a scenario here, kind of a real life example. Maria is a high performing project coordinator in a mid-sized manufacturing company. She has always been a dependable, detail-oriented, willing to go the extra mile. Over the last 6 months, her workload has increased due to staff turnover and new projects. So, some things that are happening. She's continuing to meet deadlines, but tasks that once took her 2 hours now take twice as long. Coworkers are noticing that she's quieter in meetings and no longer volunteers for cross-functional initiatives. She started using more sick days, which she rarely took time off before. Her manager assumes she's handling it fine because nothing major has fallen through the cracks. Maria is experiencing quiet cracking. She's still functioning, but the pressure is taking a toll. Without intervention, she's likely to burn out or leave the organization. So, just a few things to think about. What red flags of quiet cracking are present? What should her manager do differently to recognize and address her situation? And how could the team or HR support her before it escalates? So think through those questions. All right. In conclusion, what's one thing that you'll do differently based on what you learned today? And I've got a few tools for you here. So I've got a quiet cracking toolkit. You can scan the QR here, and then you'll see where you can contact me for additional information, as well as go to my website and free resources on my website. Influence HR is the short commercial, is a HR consulting firm that helps busy leaders and HR attract, retain, and develop talented employees. If you have any needs in those areas, I would love to chat with you. Thank you so much for listening.